Welcome to the Yankee Cowboy Podcast, coming to you from Dallas, Texas. Here's your host, Tim Wilkins.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another awesome episode of the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. I'm joined again by the co-host of co-hosts, Chris. And today's topic is something that I think me and you, Chris, have wanted to talk about for a long time. As race car fans, motorsports fans, as they want to call us. There's only so many races that are considered to be the crown jewels of racing. And today's topic is exactly that. It is the crown jewels. Which one is the best crown jewel of them all? Chris, I think there is no better way to start this topic off than which one that just finished this past weekend, which is not the Rolex 24. No, it's the Rolex 24. And arguably one of the greatest, coolest races to watch. It was live on the Peacock app, or on NBC Universal channels of TV. Chris, I think, we can go through the crown jewels, exactly what we consider them, but, from your experience, the 24 is kind of the marquee, right, this past weekend. So just to see what you think of that race this past weekend before we kind of dive into what we want to talk about here.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about it, it's the proverbial kickoff. I mean, some people would say, oh, it's the Chili Bowl, but it's really the proverbial kickoff of the North American, racing season. The event itself has brought all types of, pageantry, obviously, from not only the fact of, for sports car racing, but bringing in guys from Nascar and Indycar and all different forms of motorsports to compete in this event. And I think this year, obviously, had a different feel with the new top class of GTP, with the new hypercar hybrid type programs that we saw from Acura and Cadillac and Porsche and BMW. And that really that first event for those cars to compete was really, really cool, and obviously a great event. And all basically in four of the five classes, you had close finishes. The only class that didn't have a close finish was the LMP3 class, which I think the winner won that by like 11 laps. But all the other classes, including the LMP2 class, which was within, I think, was a few hundredths of a second between the top two cars. So cool event, obviously. Kickoff to the motorsport season in 2023, and before you know it'll be the time for the Daytona 500 here in a little less than 2 weeks.
I will say that the GTP cars, the new cars, they just sounded so much better on TV compared to the last series of the top series, and honestly, it was a great race. If you actually paid attention to the race itself, there was a lot of cool moments, and just like you said, that the finish, I think, didn't get a justice on television with how close the finish actually was with all the series, because I think it was weird. It was the way NBC kind of cut around. It really didn't show how close that race really was for a lot of the competition. So it was really unique. Obviously, when we're talking about today's topic of the crown jewels of motorsports, the Daytona, the 24 hours of Daytona is obviously one of them, but we're talking about there's 24 hours of Le Mans, the Monaco, the Formula One race at Monaco, which is obviously Memorial Day weekend, the Coca-Cola 600, the Indy 500, the Daytona 500, and the Southern 500 is considered a crown jewel moment. There's a couple other races that I think we can consider in North America. I think the race at Sebring is pretty awesome. It's a cool track. Chris, I don't know what your view on that is, for North America. But
yeah, Sebring 12-hour. Yeah.
Yep, is pretty cool. Obviously the 12 hours of Bathurst, which is another cool race. There's a lot of cool races in the motorsports realm, and I think arguably today's topic is one of those where you kind of just fanboy out, because if you've been to any one of these races, which I think both of us have, there's certain race that kind of just comes to mind, that sticks out in your mind, that is probably one of the, if not arguably the coolest fan experience. Obviously there's moments where you kind of go, I wish I was there. And some tracks are better than others for that. And that's kind of where I want to kind of talk about. And obviously, the top 5 that I rank supreme on all-time levels of what I enjoy. Obviously, going to Daytona and doing what I'm doing. When I've been to Daytona, it's arguably, I would say it is the beginnings of NASCAR. If you're a NASCAR fan in the United States, Daytona 500 is something that you have to do, as well as the Southern 500, because that's where the Southern roots really started in the sport. I think Darlington Motor Speedway, in my view, is really one of the coolest experiences for a lot of motorsports fans if they ever have an opportunity to go. Obviously, it's about a 2-hour drive from Charlotte, but one of the weird things that I want to talk about with Daytona isn't the Daytona 500 is arguably the oval. But for a race car fan or a racing fan, it is a pretty boring race to watch unless you have some kind of involvement with the fan experience of some kind, because of its restrictor plate style. Now, arguably, I rank it at my fifth top 5 is probably the 5th is the Daytona 500. And the reason being has nothing to do with the track itself. It has to do with the type of racing that you're watching. It's a long day. It's kind of a drag. The hotel amenities pretty good for the most part, but it's a pretty rough go there to kind of get a flight into Orlando or Jacksonville or Daytona. It's not really fun for the fan experience to try to do that. And also, if you try to fly into Daytona Beach, your flight's going to cost you about $800. So don't try to do that. Which the 4th, in my view, is the Southern 500. And the reason being is there's a lot of history at the Southern 500. To me, it's where the roots of the sport kind of got its deal in the motorsports world of NASCAR. 3, in my view, is the Rolex 24. It is the most one of the coolest endurance races you'll ever watch, with multiple different cars. Number 2 is the F1 race at Monaco. For the arguably, can kind of group that with the 24 hours of Le Mans. You might argue with me on that one. I'm not a big crazy fan of the 24-hour Le Mans race because of the North American coverage. It tends not to be as sound. And the number 1 race, I personally believe, is the greatest race of all time when it comes to Crown Jewels, is the Indianapolis 500. For the fan perspective, what the city of Indianapolis does, or the city of Speedway does, if you want to call it that. If you've ever been there, you understand what I mean by that. The amount of infrastructure, obviously, has been renovated. Roger Penske purchasing the track this past couple years. The Indianapolis 500 is probably arguably the greatest American race, or arguably the crown jewel of all time. Just because of the track is a little dated. Don't get me wrong. Like most tracks are, they get dated. But the fan experience, as a person has gone to it, yes, is a little bit of a challenge. Yes, but is it something that you can overcome as a fan? Absolutely. Is it something that the city of Indianapolis embraces year over year over year and drives pretty much the city's economy is that race for that particular weekend? And I think it's kind of the craziest thing I learned about being there and watching the race, Chris. I think you can disagree with me on this. I did not know that the race was blacked out in the city of Indianapolis during the race itself. I did not know that until I was there. And it was cool because I watched a replay after I got to a restaurant to basically get dinner for the night after being at the track all day. It was pretty cool. And I think arguably, I want to hear your thoughts on maybe your top 5 crown jewels are. Maybe we can kind of go back and forth on a couple, but I think arguably the Indianapolis 500, especially nowadays with Roger Penske owning the IndyCar series, as well as the track and what he has done to the track so far with the renovations that are planned and will be planned, as well as I'm pretty sure I'm not sure if you were at the infield area at all when you went. I think you said you mentioned you went. How your experience was in the snake pit this past go around.
Well, I didn't actually go in the snake pit, but yes, just from the ancillary part of the snake pit, it looked like quite the party itself.
So my thing is, I think the Indianapolis 500 to me as a fan experience, it beats the Daytona 500, and it's a hard negotiation tactic for me as a fan experience. Like, you're going to spend your hard-earned money to go watch a race. The Indianapolis 500 is definitely the race to go watch. Now, you don't have to be a crazy follower of the IndyCar series. You don't have to know every driver, but you do get to enjoy some pretty cool-ass racing. So, that's just me. But your thoughts, my friend, see what your top 5 are, and we'll kind of go from there, man.
Yeah, I think we're actually you got your list written down. I think honestly we may have it in the exact same order. I think maybe I might have one differ from yours. Number 5, I have the Southern 500. Obviously, Darlington Raceway is NASCAR's oldest super speedway. Built in 1950. So the event itself, I mean, obviously it's a who's who of who's ever won that race. It was the original 500-mile race. I think the first one took about 6 hours to complete. The track itself, they call, it's got all the nicknames: Lady in Black, Too Tough to Tame, and it's, if not one of the hardest, most challenging tracks on the circuit. And it's a long race. So I've got the Southern 500 as my number 5. My number 4 is the 24 Hours of Le Mans in France. I know you picked Daytona. The only reason why I kind of give Le Mans a little bit of a proverbial step up above Daytona. I mean, just strictly the history. The first 24 Hours of Le Mans was run back in the early 1920s. The circuit itself is 8.5 miles long. Still, while most of the majority of the circuit now is a permanent racetrack, there are the Mulsanne Straight there is still actual public road, and there are hardly any country circuits in the world that still utilize some bit of public road outside of obviously street circuits, but Le Mans still does utilize some bit of the public country roads there in that part of France. That event obviously is has over 100 years of history, and I think is without a doubt, when it comes to, if you're a big time sports car racing fan, that's the one event that you'd like to win is the 20.
Yeah, I grouped that with the F1 race in Monaco. Actually, is the number 3. Just a heads up.
I got Monaco at 3. Monaco, obviously, they call it the crown jewel of the Formula One season. Monaco itself is only, I read something that it's only that the population of Monaco grows by like 4 or 5-fold when the race is in town. It's really a fishing village that has $100 million yachts that pull up in there for the race itself. The only reason why I'm not as big of a Monaco fan is the racing there is not really that good. I mean, the track is not built for modern F1 cars. The chances of passing anybody.
Just a heads up, that's actually the oldest F1 track on the circuit, by the way.
Well done. Thank you, sir. Yeah, but in terms of the ability to pass, I mean, it's not the best race to watch. There's no passing in the event. Really, it's kind of like, okay, depending on where you qualify, aside from attrition in the race, that's basically how you're going to finish. Number 2, I have the Daytona 500. Obviously the Super Bowl of NASCAR events starts the season. To be a Daytona 500 champion, I mean, it's one of the few races that when you look at it and you say to yourself, you can be a Cup Series champion or you can win the Daytona 500. Those are the only few races that when somebody says I'm a champion, I'm a Daytona, where you put the word champion and race together. I think it's one of the few that you say I'm a Daytona 500 champion along with being a NASCAR champion or something. So, and then number one, we both agreed the Indianapolis 500. I mean the trademark is the greatest spectacle in racing, and there's no doubt about it. Over 100 years of history at the Speedway, and as you so eloquently said, I mean, Indianapolis embraces the event. I mean, it's a generational event. You hear folks who go to the race that they've been going since the 40s, the 50s, or the 60s, or the 70s. Through generations of families going. People. One of the big things for people who go to the 500 is getting the race pin. I read back in 2020 when there were folks when there were no fans at the Indianapolis 500, there are actually fans who tailgated across the street, across 16th Street, so they could so their streak wasn't broken, that they wouldn't break their streak of attending the Indianapolis 500, even though they weren't physically on the grounds of the inside the facility to watch the race. That was how important it was for them to continue their streak of.
I will say that I did not get mine when I went, and I'm actually kind of sad. And I did not know about the pin rule. I did not know.
Yeah, that's kind of an old timers thing, but again, that the 500 is such a. I mean, it's the biggest single day sporting event in the world. You're talking over 400,000 people packed into this facility. It's truly one of the most. And
it starts bright ass early. Like traffic highways. I'll just for the listeners at home, Chris. I think you've been to it as well. If you don't get onto the grounds or within the vicinity of the track itself by a certain time, you ain't getting there. And it's crazy. And the highway shuts down. And this is the crazy thing. My story of going to the Indy 500. I was out the night before the race. And they're like, hey, man, the race starts pretty early. You got to get there over there early. I'm like, hey, it's a noontime start. I'll get over there at 10. They're like, nah, man. You got to be up there by 8, get a spot, to and hell, I didn't even get really close. I had my ride drop me off literally probably about maybe a mile or so away from the track because the traffic was so bad. And I still, and I don't know about you, Chris, but I differentiate between the Daytona 500 and the Rolex 24. To me, as a race fan, as a NASCAR fan as well, it's very difficult nowadays to watch Daytona the entire length of the race. If that makes sense to you? You kind of have a lull point in the race itself. Like you talk about Le Mans, I have no issue with Le Mans. I just think that the coverage here in the United States needs to be drastically better. In order for the fandom to kind of take its ownership here in the United States, which I think this past offseason they talked about having these NASCAR teams like Hendrick and a couple other teams get involved in the 24-hour Le Mans. But I think, seriously, the one thing I think we're both on the same page about is the Indianapolis 500 is something that is unique to fans. Like it's not just a race car event. It is literally they call it the spectacle for a reason. There is infield stuff going on. The snake pit, they call it. That's having a good time. There's a reputation. When I was there, people were bringing in cases of beer with them and coolers. People were drinking beer, giving you beer because hell, they're not going to drink it. All that stuff. Only thing is,
Then you factor in too. I mean, we talk about tradition and the event. It's kind of an overused term, but that the event is steeped in tradition. But it truly is. You think about some of the traditions of the Indianapolis 500, like the bagpipes and like the Purdue marching band and singing "Back Home Again" in Indiana.
And also a pole day. Pole day is another one. I mean, not too many races have that, as well as the carb day. And the cool thing about if you stay in downtown Indianapolis, they have the parade. They do all that stuff, and it's the pageantry of it. And it really is a fun event. Like it's difficult for a fan. Like the reason why I bring up my top 5 the way it is because I think as a fan experience, if you're going to spend your hard-earned money to go to the event and kind of stimulate the economy of that city, you really want to get all of it. You want to get the whole entire fan experience. And Indianapolis, in my view, hits the nail on the head over every year. It seems like there's obviously the names will change, right? The winners will change. But the race itself is unique, I think, as well to a fan that's never really watched a lot of racing before. It still draws casual fans, still draws regular diehard fans too. So I think the Indy 500 is unique. The 24-hour Rolex, I think that is a unique fandom in itself as well. I think you can agree with me on this. To sit and watch that race for the entire 24-hour race is probably one of the hardest things a person can do, let alone the endurance races to begin with. But the city of Daytona tends to do a pretty good job of it for the most part. I would say, Chris, was the crowd at the 24 hours pretty the same as the Daytona 500, or you say the Daytona 500
No,
has a bigger crowd?
completely different. Both crowds, and I read upwards. There were upwards of about 50 to 60,000 people at the Daytona 24. I would tend to believe there were more, just looking at the number of people on the grid. But it is the two fan bases. I mean, obviously you'll have some crossover folks who are just racing fans and want to attend, but for the most part, both fan bases are totally different. You're the from a NASCAR standpoint in Daytona. I mean, the drivers are the stars. The cars are very, for the most part, the cars are very secondary. It's really about who the drivers are and the personalities and who people follow. You're a Chase Elliott fan. You're a Ryan Blaney fan. You're a Joey Logano fan. You're a Ross Chastain fan. That's who you are. You're not there. You might have some people who are fans of Hendrick Motorsports or Team Penske or RFK Racing, but it's the drivers who really push the event itself. Now, when you look at the Rolex 24 or any sports car race, for example, it's all about the cars itself. The cars are the stars of the event. The drivers are almost secondary. I mean, there are some drivers have who have fandom, have some fan appeal, and people who know who they are. But really, it's all about the makes. I mean, if you're a Porsche fan, if you're a Ferrari fan, if you're a Corvette fan, like those fans are tried and true to their makes. It's kind of similar to what NASCAR was in its infancy, where you had people who were Ford fans and Chevy fans. But now I think it's more solely focused on who the driver is. Whereas in sports car racing, it's all about the manufacturer itself. And I think Formula One is a mix. I think you have people, I think Formula One's kind of the happy medium between, if you look at it, because you have people who are fans of Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton but who are Ferrari fans or Mercedes fans or you Red Bull fans. You name the team. But I think that's the only sport to me that transcends both. It's probably Formula One. IndyCar, I think IndyCar is kind of similar to NASCAR as well. I mean, they all drive the same car, so it's really about who the driver and the team is.
I think here's the weird, unique kind of play. I want to say this. I think uniquely, Formula One is a better product in a sense of the car. Obviously, the cars are really high end. But the thing is, the product here in the United States that's portrayed, I don't know about you, man, but like they were doing broadcast coverages at like 6, 7 a.m. in the morning on Sunday morning for these Grand Prix on the other side of the world. And I'm sorry, but the broadcasts are a little bit different. There's a lot more like the radio. You hear the radios of the teams in a unique way. I think Formula One is not Americanized. It is more of it's a global sport. And in that regard, it's going to be unique to see how Formula One kind of drives going forward. And we're talking about the Monaco race. The Monaco, and I brought this tidbit out. Monaco is the oldest circuit that Formula One uses. And for being, like you said, the racing is kind of boring. You would think that what drives the money, you talked about it, what gets parked outside the Monaco, the island of Monaco, it's those billion-dollar yachts. So, of course, Formula One, you see that with a lot of big high-end money being spent. So for a fan experience, as much as I rank Monaco like number 3 in the same group of Le Mans, it's going to cost you a pretty penny to go over there as a fan, to watch that race. And as a fan, it kind of deters you away from wanting to watch it live because you don't know the logistics of it. It might be more of a pain in the ass than it's worth. And the United States, I think, with Formula One coming here to Las Vegas to do a street circuit race, I think it's going to turn off a lot of fans in the United States away from Formula One. And I bring that in the nicest way possible because, and this is unique, I'll talk about it, is that the cost of admission to that race, it being the inaugural event, is ridiculously expensive. And Las Vegas notoriously is an expensive city, regardless of however you want to fray it. It's expensive no matter what. But when you put the tickets of a Formula One race, which even for the Circuit of America, the Grand Prix of the Americas in Austin, it was an expensive race to go to. And I'm sorry, but you kind of have to rein the Formula One, in my view, as an American, you kind of have to rein in the ticket prices in order to get more fandom from the United States. And it's the same thing with, I think, Le Mans. I'm not sure the tickets of Le Mans, the 24-hour Le Mans, but they're sold out already. The 24-hour is already sold out. The Rolex 24, I'm pretty sure with what you stated with the pop, the tickets and everything else, they were still available up until I think around Christmas is when they started you were going to start seeing the scarcity of ticket prices. So the Daytona Daytona 500 is one of those races as well that it still sells out every year. The Indianapolis 500, like you said, it's a generational thing. When I went, I was lucky to get a ticket where I got the ticket, and I wish I had. It's like a nuance, Chris. You kind of know where you want to sit, where you think you want to sit, what might be a good spot to sit. But when you get to a track that size, you're kind of just hunkering down and hope it works out for the best, So I don't know what your thoughts on the Formula One in the United States are, but I'll be interested to see what they do going forward. But like I said, they need to kind of rein their ticket prices in stateside if they want more fandom.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. I mean, I think obviously Formula One sees, obviously Formula One has ownership now here with Liberty Media, who purchased the rights to Formula One probably almost half a decade ago. So I think one of the this American market here is obviously big. I mean, it's the biggest media market that they want to break into. Question for Formula One is going to be, obviously now you have, traditionally you only had one Grand Prix per country. Now here with Liberty, we're going to have 3 rounds of the World Championship in the United States, which is kind of unheard of. I mean, at one time we did have multiple rounds, but now we have 3 rounds of the World Championship here. As you mentioned, Miami, then Austin, and then Las Vegas. So I think a concern for me would be is obviously, the going is really good right now for Formula One in the United States, but at what point do you oversaturate the market and in turn, kind of hurt your product? I mean, I think the way they're kind of portraying Vegas is that it's a Monaco-esque type event. I think they're doing the same with Miami. So there's a method to the madness, but it's going to be interesting to see if long-term how sustainable having 3 rounds of a championship in one country is.
I just think, Chris, that Las Vegas, that street circuit style, which I'm pretty sure the designs have come out on the internet, and you can see the way they want to build the Las Vegas Strip involvement into it and everything else. I just think it's a very, how would I say, gimmicky, as a nice way of putting it, bow on an organization that really doesn't need to do that. Why don't you do the? Why don't you do? It's all about, exactly. It's all about, it's all about cash flow and money and drive and a lot of things. Why don't they do Long Beach, the circuit of Long Beach? Why don't they do Sebring? Why don't they do? There's many circuits in this country, in the United States, that are worthy enough to.
Because those circuits aren't up to the standards of the FIA.
Okay, well, I mean, that's the thing. If you give them a contract, you would think, Chris, that you would kind of lock it in, for like, say, a 5-year deal for the safety style. I understand what you're talking about on the safety standards. Yeah, I understand that part. But like if you commit to it for 5 years, then it gives a track an outlet saying, okay, we have this commitment. Let's upgrade our track. So
it's safety. It's safety. There's multifaceted thing. It's safety, but it's also, areas like hospitality and just those, unfortunately, circuits like for example, Long Beach at one time was an F1 track, but the infrastructure around that type of event is not sustainable.
Oh, it's tough when it's tough when they do the Long Beach circuit in general. It puts a drain on that city for weeks, months. It's bad.
No, I mean it makes money. The Long Beach Grand Prix is, it's the oldest street circuit event in the United States. I mean, street circuit events have, I've told people before, street circuit events are like restaurants. They have a very high failure rate. The Long Beach Grand Prix, I think, has been the only event that has been a stalwart, and obviously the area, that area there has embraced the event itself. But yeah, I completely get where you're coming from in terms of, why hasn't Formula One looked at a existing circuit? But it just, unfortunately,
for example, I'll make this argument. Las Vegas, in my view, if you're going to go to that race, it gives Las Vegas an excuse to raise the rates for the rooms, which they already have done, to the sky high level. They don't need any more excuse to raise the rates on their rooms or their hospitality to begin with when there's events going on in the city. So Las Vegas, to me, is not I mean, I know it's an automatic destination already. So like, what's the lure that Vegas? It's like basically putting icing on the cake that's already a cake. It's Miami. When they did announce Miami, I was like, okay, that's cool. Miami is a cool city. That makes sense. Like, so why Las Vegas is my kind of like, that's my hiccup.
I think you answer your own question there. It's like let's use NASCAR as an example. What they're doing this year in 2023. I know it's kind of off topic, but they Road America was getting upwards of almost 100,000 fans, but it's Road America. It's in the middle of nowhere. It's basically in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin.
Hey, it's a beautiful place. Don't hey.
It is, no, without a doubt. But it's in the middle of
Spotted Cow.
It's in between Green Bay and Milwaukee. There's really nothing there except this, very, very nice racing circuit. Whereas you go to Chicago, excuse me, and
murder capital of the United States, by the way.
I'm not agreeing that it's the safest place to be, but when it comes down to it, television wants to be in a major media market. I think the sponsors want to be in a major media market, and the team certainly may not want to be there, but unfortunately, money kind of runs this show. That's why we're going to be, this. Not sure when whenever this episode will be coming out, because we're taping this before the LA Clash. But I don't think teams really enjoyed going out all the way out to California from their home base in the Carolinas to do an exhibition race. But
I mean, that's why I Chris, we're gonna. I know we're kind of getting off topic here, but this is worth talking about because it's worth it, because to me the LA Coliseum race is the complete. It's a laughing stock of the entire sport of racing. I'm sorry, but everyone thought when Bristol Motor Speedway was a short track and it had a lot of bumping and wrecking that it was exciting. Well, guess what? When you watch that race, Bristol is amazing because of what it is. Bristol Motor Speedway takes talent. It's not just bumping and using the shit out of somebody to move them out the way. This LA Coliseum race, it's an exhibition, so it's not even a point race, by the way, and it doesn't even pay out that good. Hell, the saga on the internet right now, on Twitter and everywhere else on social media, is who's doing the pre-race concert and who's doing this and who's doing that. Why don't they do a cool exhibition race? I don't know. Anywhere. Why does it have to be the LA Coliseum? I don't understand that they want to try to get fans from that market. And I understand that they obviously are renovating the California Auto Club Speedway to a short track. So it's putting like a hat on a hat. It's just kind of ridiculous. I'm not a fan. Not saying this, was a bad idea, but like logistically, as a sports team, as a race car team, that sucks to drive. Have a hauler drive 3,000 miles in the middle of February, and then drive it back to Daytona just to go back out there again, because that's the West Coast swing happens within a 2-week period of time. How is that cost effective for these teams? Like, I think it's redundant.
It's not at all.
And it is. I understand that they're trying to drive sponsorship money and this, that, and the other thing, but it is beyond comprehend. I'm sorry, but the race is terrible. I don't know about your views on it, but the race, in my opinion, is definitely lackluster. I'd rather watch the Bristol dirt race in the spring twice than watch what I'm about to watch at the LA Coliseum. And by the way, if anyone wants to know, I am not a fan of putting dirt on Bristol Motor Speedway. I hate it. Hate the idea. It's the most fucking ridiculous. Bristol Motor Speedway has more history, arguably, before the repave than any other track in the nation, other than Darlington or Daytona, because of how cool it actually was. To watch those guys do what they do at Bristol for 500 laps is amazing. I arguably can say that Bristol Motor Speedway, any of the night race, or even the spring race, could be a crown jewel if you actually are a fan, because it's a great experience. Minus that it's in the middle of nowhere. That's the only problem. I digress. I think, seriously, the Las Vegas idea for Formula One, in my opinion, is going to draw out within 3 to 5 years. I don't think it's going to work. And I think they're going to have to find another opportunity somewhere else. And I think what they're going to have to do is kind of revamp their ticket pricing. And either they go back to Circuit of Americas in Austin with a better model business-wise, and it can drive North American traffic there. Maybe keep Miami. But yeah, I don't see Las Vegas lasting unless they kind of, I'm sorry, dude, but no one's going to spend $10,000 to go watch a Formula One race when a lot of American fans can't afford that right now. It's kind of out of touch with what's going on in the country. It's just, unless you're completely rich, which I understand. Awesome. Cool. You have money. But at the same time, a lot of people can't. So I think we can go back and forth about this, but it is one of the few things when it comes to Road of America. That's another great track in the United States. Probably one of the coolest road courses, I think, design wise. The fan experience is pretty cool. From what I understand, I've not been there, but from what I read and what I listen to, a lot of people that have been there. I've traveled to Wisconsin usually every year for business, and it's a really fun state to be in. So I don't. Chris, I can say to you, man, I don't know what your thoughts are on Watkins Glen. I know it's been a while since you've been up there, but, why not Watkins Glen? Why not Watkins Glen for a Formula One race?
Yeah, they used to have F1 races up there, but would require a lot of updates. There's no doubt about that.
Yep, you're right about that, and that's where I think if you get a track, which during the pandemic, man, I don't see what was the issue with Formula One, or even when IMSA announced the schedule, which was pretty unique that they announced their schedule, and I saw the tracks they were going to. Some of them I never even heard of. Not saying I show my not street car racing prowess there, but Virginia International Speedway, never heard of it. Road Atlanta, I didn't know existed apparently until it did. Showing my rookiness in that one, but it's pretty cool. But that being said, guys, I'm going to call it here, man. I appreciate everyone taking a listen to this banter between which is the Crown Jewel, which universally has been accepted as the Indianapolis 500 by these two. If you disagree, feel free to argue on Twitter. It might go on deaf ears, but it's worth the banter. You can follow us on Yankee Cowboy Pod on Twitter, as well on Instagram, for all your cool updates as well on Instagram and Twitter. Also, enjoy. This episode will be coming out before the LA Coliseum race, but enjoy the beginning of the race car season, because once we get to the West Coast, it starts to draw out really bad. So, Chris, appreciate you joining me as always again for another episode. And thanks for the banter.
Do it again next week.
Oh, yes, sir.
Thank you for listening to the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. Feel free to follow us on social media via Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.